Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Top 5 Haunted Locations. In this video, we are going to explore some of the most terrifying places in Utah, where the paranormal is more than just a legend. These are locations with a dark and tragic history, where ghosts, spirits, and other eerie phenomena have been reported. So, if you are ready, let's begin our countdown. Number 5, Rock Canyon, Provo, Utah. Rock Canyon is a scenic and rugged canyon in the Wasatch Mountains, east of Provo, Utah. It is a popular destination for hikers, campers, and rock climbers, who enjoy its diverse terrain and stunning views. But Rock Canyon also has a dark and bloody past, that may have left some restless spirits behind. The first recorded history of the canyon is related to the conflict between the Mormon settlers and the native Timpanogos tribe in 1850. The settlers, who had established Fort Utah near the Provo River, clashed with the Timpanogos over land and resources. A battle broke out, resulting in the death of dozens of natives and several settlers. The surviving Timpanogos, led by their chief Big Elk, fled to Rock Canyon to escape the militia. Big Elk was fatally wounded and died near the mouth of the canyon. His wife, who tried to climb the cliffs to evade capture, also fell and died. The peak north of the canyon was named Squaw Peak in memory of her tragic death. In the 1860s, Rock Canyon was settled by pioneer families, who cleared the land for farming and used the creek for drinking water. However, the land proved to be too hostile for their crops, and they soon abandoned it. The canyon then became a grazing area for cattle and sheep, as well as a source of minerals. Several mines were established in the canyon, extracting gold, silver, copper, and lead. Some of these mines still exist today, as well as the remnants of the old buildings and equipment. The mining activity also caused environmental damage and pollution in the canyon. Rock Canyon is said to be haunted by several ghosts, who may be connected to its tragic history. Hikers have reported hearing screams, whispers, drumming sounds, and footsteps in the woods, as well as seeing apparitions and shadows among the trees and rocks. Some of these sounds and sights may be attributed to the spirits of the Timpanogos, who were massacred and buried in unmarked graves in the canyon. Some hikers have also felt cold spots, touches, and scratches on their skin, as if the spirits are trying to communicate or warn them. Another ghost that has been seen in the canyon is that of a man dressed in 1970s clothing, who appears on a rock peak and then runs down the mountain at a high speed, before disappearing. Some speculate that he may be the ghost of a rock climber who fell and died in the canyon, or a victim of a murder that took place there. A third ghost that has been reported is that of a little girl, who plays and sings along the creek. She is often seen holding a doll or a toy, and she vanishes when approached. Her identity and origin are unknown, but some believe that she may be the daughter of one of the miners or settlers who lived in the canyon. If you decide to visit Rock Canyon, be prepared for a beautiful but haunted hike. You may encounter some of the ghosts that linger there, or hear some of the noises that they make. Be respectful of the land and the spirits, and do not disturb or provoke them. You may also want to bring a friend, a flashlight, and a camera, just in case you see or hear something unusual. Number 4. Mercur Cemetery, Tooele, Utah. Mercur Cemetery is a lonely and eerie place, located on a hillside west of Tooele, Utah. It is the only surviving remnant of the town of Mercur, which was once a prosperous mining town in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The cemetery is a witness to the rise and fall of Mercur, and the lives and deaths of its inhabitants. Mercur was originally named Lewiston, after the first settlers who arrived in the area in 1869. They discovered gold in the nearby hills, and soon a mining camp was established. However, the gold was hard to extract, and the town struggled to survive. In 1873, a fire destroyed most of the buildings, and the town was abandoned. In 1889, a new method of extracting gold from or using cyanide was introduced, and Mercur was reborn. The town was renamed after the Roman god of commerce and travelers, and it became one of the first and largest gold producers in Utah. Mercur attracted thousands of miners, businessmen, and families, who built homes, stores, hotels, saloons, churches, and schools. Mercur also had a diverse population, with many immigrants from Italy, Greece, China, and other countries. The town was modern and progressive, with electricity, telephones, newspapers, and even a baseball team. However, Mercur's prosperity was short-lived. In 1902, another fire swept through the town, destroying almost everything in its path. The fire was caused by a spark from a dynamite blast at one of the mines, and it spread quickly due to the dry weather and the wooden structures. The fire killed at least 13 people, and left many more injured and homeless. The town was partially rebuilt, but it never regained its former glory. The gold production declined, and the mines closed one by one. By 1913, Mercur was a ghost town. The only thing that remained of Mercur was the cemetery, where many of the town's residents were buried. The cemetery is located on a hillside, surrounded by sagebrush and barbed wire. The graves are marked by wooden crosses, metal plaques, or stone monuments, some of which are broken or illegible. The cemetery contains about 400 graves, but there may be more that are unmarked or hidden by the vegetation. The cemetery is a testament to the town's history, and the people who lived and died there. Mercur Cemetery is also said to be haunted by the ghosts of those who rest there. Visitors have reported seeing orbs, mists, and figures among the gravestones, as well as hearing voices, laughter, and crying. Some of the ghosts that have been identified are a little girl, who likes to play with dolls and toys that people leave on her grave. She is often seen wearing a white dress and holding a doll, and she vanishes when approached. An Italian miner, who likes to chat with visitors using an EMF meter. He is friendly and curious, and he asks questions about the modern world. He is also protective of his fellow miners, and he warns visitors not to disturb their graves. A woman in a purple dress, who wanders around the cemetery and the nearby road. She is believed to be a prostitute who worked in Mercur, and who was killed by a jealous lover. She is sometimes seen hitchhiking or waving at passing cars. The cemetery is not easy to find, and you may need permission from the landowner to access it. But if you do, be prepared for a spooky and historical visit. The cemetery is a place of respect and mystery, where the past and the present meet. You may encounter some of the ghosts that haunt the cemetery, or hear some of the stories that they have to tell. But remember, be respectful and mindful of the history and the hauntings. Number 3, Old Tooele Hospital, Tooele, Utah. The Old Tooele Hospital is a historic and haunted building in Tooele, Utah, that dates back to 1873. It was originally built as a residence by Samuel F. Lee, but it was later converted into a hospital, a nursing home, and a haunted attraction. The hospital witnessed many deaths and tragedies, and it is said to be haunted by several ghosts and spirits. The building was constructed by Samuel F. Lee, who was a prominent businessman and politician in Tooele County. He built the house for his family, and he lived there until 1913, when he sold it to the county. The county turned the house into a home for the elderly and the poor, and it was known as the County Poor House. The house was not well equipped for medical care, and it lacked proper facilities such as individual bathrooms and a morgue. The dead were stacked in a room until the mortuary came to pick them up. In 1953, the house became the Tooele Hospital, after the new Tooele County Hospital was built for the Tooele Army Depot. The hospital served the community for many years, but it also saw a lot of death and suffering. Many patients died from diseases, accidents, and suicides, and some of the staff were also killed or murdered on the premises. The hospital closed in 2001, and since then, it has been used as a haunted attraction and a paranormal investigation site. The hospital is said to be haunted by several ghosts, including a little girl named Jessica, who likes to play with toys and dolls, a nurse named Wes, who likes to flirt with women, and a violent entity named Samuel, who likes to attack and scratch people. The hospital is also full of strange noises, smells, and sensations, such as footsteps, moans, screams, cold breezes, and electrical malfunctions. Some of the ghosts that have been identified and encountered are Jessica. She is a little girl who died in the hospital, and she likes to play with the toys and dolls that people leave for her. She is often seen wearing a pink dress and holding a doll, and she sometimes talks or sings to visitors. She is friendly and innocent, and she does not seem to realize that she is dead. Wes, he is a nurse who worked at the hospital, and he suffered from Alzheimer's disease. He is often seen wearing a white uniform and a name tag, and he likes to flirt with female visitors. He is also curious and talkative, and he likes to ask questions about the modern world. He is protective of his fellow nurses, and he warns visitors not to disturb them. Samuel, he is a dark and malevolent entity, who may be related to the original owner of the house, Samuel F. Lee. He is often seen wearing a black suit and a hat, and he likes to scratch, push, and choke people. He is also responsible for causing electrical problems, such as turning off the lights and the cameras. He is angry and violent, and he does not like visitors in his house. The hospital is open to the public for tours and events, but you may need to sign a waiver before entering. The hospital is a place of horror and history, where the living and the dead meet. You may encounter some of the ghosts that haunt the hospital, or hear some of the stories that they have to tell. But remember, be respectful and careful of the history and the hauntings. Number 2. Rio Grande Depot, Salt Lake City, Utah. The Rio Grande Depot is a historic and haunted building in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, that was built in 1910 by the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. The depot was a major hub of transportation and commerce, but it also witnessed many tragedies and deaths. The depot is now home to the Utah State Historical Society and the Rio Gallery, but it is also home to a ghost known as the Purple Lady. The depot was constructed by the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, which was one of the rival railroads that competed for the lucrative transcontinental route in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The depot was designed by Chicago architect Henry Schlacks, who was known for his churches and other railroad depots. The depot cost $750,000 to build, and it was intended to surpass the nearby Union Pacific Depot, which was built the previous year. The depot was built in the Renaissance Revival and Beaux Arts style, with a grand entrance, high arched windows, and a copper dome. The depot had many amenities, such as a barber shop, a restaurant, a smoking room, a lounge, a telegraph office, and a souvenir shop. The depot opened Salt Lake City to a new influx of immigrants, tourists, and businessmen, who traveled by train to and from the city. The depot also served as a central point in shipping soldiers off to war in both World War I and World War II. The depot was the terminus of several famous trains, such as the California Zephyr, the Desert Wind, and the Pioneer. The depot was also the site of several accidents and crimes, such as fires, explosions, robberies, and murders. The depot saw a decline in passenger service in the 1950s, due to the rise of highway and air travel. The depot closed in 1999, after Amtrak relocated its trains to a different hub in Salt Lake City. The depot is said to be haunted by several ghosts, but the most famous one is the Purple Lady. The Purple Lady was a young woman who was hit and killed by a train at the depot many years ago, after she lost her engagement ring on the tracks and went to retrieve it. Her ghost is said to wear a purple dress and hat, and to wander the upstairs and the cafe area, looking for her ring. She is also said to cause flickering lights, water problems, and object movements, as well as to appear and disappear in front of witnesses. Other ghosts that have been reported at the depot are a man dressed in 1970s clothing, who appears on a rock peak and then runs down the mountain at a high speed, before disappearing. He may be the ghost of a rock climber who fell and died in the canyon, or a victim of a murder that took place there. A woman in a white dress, who walks along the tracks and then vanishes. She may be the ghost of a bride who was killed by a train on her wedding day, or a woman who committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. A man in a black suit and a hat, who walks around the lobby and the mezzanine, and sometimes interacts with visitors. He may be the ghost of Samuel F. Lee, the original owner of the building, or a former employee or passenger of the depot. The depot is currently closed to the public due to the pandemic, but you can admire it from the outside and maybe catch a glimpse of the Purple Lady or the other ghosts. The depot is a place of beauty and history, where the past and the present meet. You may encounter some of the ghosts that haunt the depot, or hear some of the stories that they have to tell. But remember, be respectful and mindful of the history and the hauntings. Number 1. Mountain Meadows Massacre, Veyo, Utah. The Mountain Meadows Massacre is one of the most horrific and controversial events in Utah's history. It occurred in 1857, at a place called Mountain Meadows, near Veyo, Utah. It involved the slaughter of about 120 members of the Baker-Fancher wagon train, who were passing through Utah on their way to California. The massacre was perpetrated by a group of Mormon militia and some Native American allies, who acted under the influence of war hysteria, religious fanaticism, and possible orders from senior Mormon leaders. The massacre left a stain on the reputation of the Mormon Church and the Utah Territory, and it remains a source of debate and controversy to this day. The Baker-Fancher wagon train was composed of men, women, and children from Arkansas, who were traveling to California in search of a better life. They arrived in Salt Lake City in August 1857, hoping to resupply and rest for the final leg of their journey. However, they found the city and the surrounding settlements hostile and unwelcoming, due to the tense political and religious situation in the Utah Territory at the time. The Mormons, who had settled in Utah in 1847, were facing persecution and opposition from the federal government, which had sent an army to quell a supposed rebellion by the Mormons. The Mormons, led by their prophet and Governor Brigham Young, had declared martial law and prepared to defend their land and their faith. They viewed outsiders, especially those from Arkansas and Missouri, as enemies and potential spies. The Baker-Fancher party, feeling unwelcome and threatened, decided to leave Salt Lake City and continue their journey south along the Mormon Road, eventually reaching Mountain Meadows, a grassy valley where they planned to rest and graze their cattle. Mountain Meadows, however, was not a safe haven for the emigrants. It was located in the Iron County district of the Utah Territorial Militia, also known as the Nauvoo Legion, which was the military arm of the Mormon Church. The militia, commanded by William H. Dame and Isaac C. Haight, was on high alert and ready to fight the approaching federal troops. The militia leaders, influenced by the war hysteria and the anti-outsider rhetoric of the Mormon Church, decided to attack and destroy the Baker-Fancher Party, believing that they were a threat to the Mormon community and the Utah Territory. They also hoped to seize their cattle and supplies, which they needed for the war effort. The militia leaders, wanting to disguise their involvement and blame the massacre on the local Native Americans, recruited and persuaded some southern Paiute Indians to join them in the attack. They also dressed some of their men as Indians, and armed them with guns and knives. The attack on the Baker-Fancher Party began on September 7, 1857, when the militia and the Indians surrounded the wagon train and opened fire. The emigrants, caught by surprise, quickly formed a defensive circle with their wagons, and fought back with their rifles and pistols. The attackers, expecting an easy victory, were surprised by the resistance and the casualties they suffered. The siege lasted for 5 days, during which the emigrants ran low on water, food, and ammunition, and suffered many deaths and injuries. The attackers also suffered losses, and became worried that some of the emigrants had recognized them as white men, and not Indians. The militia leaders, fearing exposure and retaliation, decided to finish off the emigrants by treachery. They sent John D. Lee, a local Mormon leader and militia officer, to the wagon train, under a white flag of truce. Lee, pretending to be a friend and a protector, convinced the emigrants to surrender their weapons and follow him to safety. He promised them that the militia would escort them to Kedar City, where they could resupply and continue their journey. The emigrants, desperate and exhausted, agreed to Lee's terms, and left their camp. However, as they walked away from the meadow, they were ambushed by the militia and the Indians, who had hidden along the road. The emigrants, unarmed and defenseless, were shot, stabbed, and clubbed to death. Only 17 children, all under the age of 7, were spared, and taken by the attackers. The dead were hastily buried in shallow graves, and their belongings were plundered and divided among the perpetrators. The Mountain Meadows Massacre was a shocking and shameful act of violence that shocked and outraged the nation and the world. The Mormon Church and the Utah Territory tried to cover up the massacre, and blamed it on the Indians. The federal government and the public demanded justice and accountability, but the investigation and prosecution of the crime were hindered by the Utah War, the Civil War, and the lack of evidence and witnesses. The only man who was tried and executed for the massacre was John D. Lee, who was shot by a firing squad in 1877, at the site of the massacre. Lee claimed that he was a scapegoat, and that he acted under orders from his superiors, including Brigham Young. The role and responsibility of the Mormon Church and its leaders in the massacre remain disputed and controversial, and the subject of many books and studies. The Mountain Meadows Massacre is also said to be haunted by the ghosts of the victims, who are restless and unhappy with their fate. Many visitors to the site have reported feeling a sense of sadness, anger, or dread, as if the spirits are unhappy with their fate. Some have also reported seeing or hearing apparitions, voices, or cries, of the men, women, and children who were killed. The site is now a National Historic Landmark, with a monument and a memorial wall honoring the victims. The site is open to the public, but it is also a sacred and solemn place, where visitors are asked to be respectful and mindful of the history and the hauntings. And that concludes our list of the top 5 haunted locations in Utah. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to get notified of our future videos. Also, let us know in the comments if you have visited any of these places, or if you know of any other haunted locations in Utah that we missed. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay spooky.